Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates and notifications. Hello everyone, I am here to present an investigation. In 1998, an incident occurred in a bustling city in New Zealand. A Japanese female tourist travelled to an unfamiliar city by herself and subsequently disappeared. 11 days later, she was discovered in a city building. This event impacted the local tourism industry, causing people to emphasize safety during travel. Next, I will discuss the pine nut case in New Zealand. The story takes place in New Zealand, which is located in the southwestern Pacific Ocean and consists of two main islands, the North Island and the South Island. These islands are separated by the Cook Strait. New Zealand has a pleasant climate, numerous tourist attractions, and is renowned for its pristine natural environment. In the northern part of New Zealand lies a coastal city called Auckland. It is the largest city in the country. Auckland serves as a crucial transportation and shipping hub in the southern hemisphere. It is home to the highest number of sailboats in the world, earning it the nickname the sailing capital. At the heart of Auckland is New Zealand's largest commercial and financial centre, featuring numerous skyscrapers and a vibrant atmosphere. Auckland attracts many tourists each year. In the spring of 1998, a shocking murder took place in the city's downtown area. On September 22, 1998, a Tuesday, the Southern Hemisphere enjoyed pleasant spring weather, perfect for travelling. In the morning, a fire inspector named Dennis went to Queen Street in Auckland's central business district to perform his usual fire inspection. He entered the Central Plaza building and started the inspection from the top floor, moving upwards along the fire escape routes. When he reached the second floor, he noticed a strange smell in the air. He began searching for where the smell was coming from. Soon, he found that the smell was coming from behind a door, which led to a grocery store. Dennis tried to open the door, but it was locked. He went downstairs to look for the building manager to get the key. After searching, he learned that the manager was on sick leave and at home, and he didn't know where the key was. Dennis thought that the smell might be from someone hiding meat products there, which could be a fire hazard if there was too much. He decided to solve this problem that day, as it was his duty. So Dennis went back to the second floor. Hesitating outside the grocery store door, he took a screwdriver from his toolkit and slipped it into the gap between the lock and the door. In no time, the door was pried open. As the grocery store door opened, a foul smell hit him in the face. The room was dark, and Dennis couldn't see anything. He felt for the light switch on the wall and turned it on. Instantly, the small grocery store was lit up. Dennis looked around and didn't notice anything unusual at first, but soon he saw an old wardrobe in the corner. He walked up to it, pulled the door open, and the sight he saw would be unforgettable. Inside the wardrobe was the body of a woman. Dennis immediately ran out and called the police. The scene was located in the heart of Auckland City. As it was a workday, more and more people were entering the Central Plaza building. The police arrived at the scene as soon as they received the report. To prevent the scene from being disturbed, the police blocked off the back street and stairwells, prohibiting access to unauthorized individuals. The smell spread throughout several floors of the building. Investigators entered the storage room, and the woman in the wardrobe had already decomposed. Some dark black liquid had seeped into the wardrobe's wood. The woman had no clothes on, and no personal belongings or identification were found at the scene. Her identity was unknown for now. However, it was confirmed that the victim was an Asian woman aged between 20 and 30 years old. After examining the scene, the police believed that the grocery store was not the primary crime scene. The killer had murdered the woman elsewhere before moving her here. Due to the severe decomposition of the victim, the medical examiner could not determine the exact cause of death, but it was inferred that the woman had been dead for more than 10 days. The police reviewed recent missing person reports but found no one matching the description of the deceased woman. Subsequently, the police released some information about the case through the media and called for the public to provide clues. That day, a backpack containing a Japanese passport was brought to the police. A week earlier, a city cleaner watched a garbage truck perform routine cleaning work in Auckland's central business district. The truck then drove to the corner of a restroom and Albert Street, where it began to empty the trash cans in the area. During this time, a black backpack rolled out of a trash can and fell onto the sidewalk. The backpack looked somewhat valuable, so the cleaner took it home. Inside the backpack, there was a Japanese passport and some documents. Later, The cleaner handed the backpack over to the municipal office where he worked. The police found a Japanese passport, some insurance policies, and some daily necessities inside the black backpack. According to the information on the passport, the owner's name was Kayo Matsuzawa. Technicians extracted some fingerprints from the passport. After comparing these fingerprints with those in the Central Plaza building's grocery store, the victim's fingerprints matched those of Matsuzawa, so the police located her residence in Auckland, which was an open-air backpacker hostel. The person in charge told the police that Matsuzawa checked in at the hostel on September 11th, 11 days earlier, and was originally scheduled to check out 3 days later. However, on that day, she didn't show up. The cleaning staff entered Matsuzawa's room and found all her luggage still inside, with no signs of her having stayed there. The police sped up their investigation and contacted Matsuzawa's brother in Japan. Upon hearing the situation, he immediately set off for Auckland. Matsuzawa's brother provided her dental records from Japan. After comparing them with the victims, they were found to be a match. The police then confirmed the identity of the victim as Matsuzawa, who was 29 years old. Born in 1968 in a coastal village in Yamagata Prefecture, Japan, her father was a technician and her mother was a homemaker. Matsuzawa lived with her brother and their family of 4 since childhood. Besides her excellent academic performance, she also had a wide range of interests and hobbies. With her cheerful personality, she made many friends. After graduating from high school, Matsuzawa did not continue her studies. Through a chance encounter, she learned about New Zealand and was deeply attracted by its beautiful environment. Matsuzawa had always been looking forward to embarking on a spontaneous journey there one day. Matsuzawa worked at a local inn in her hometown and used her days off to attend English classes, preparing for her future trip abroad. In 1997, 28-year-old Matsuzawa had saved enough money for her international journey and planned to set off for New Zealand for a long-term adventure. Her family was worried when they learned about her plan, as they were uneasy about her traveling alone to a foreign country. To persuade her family, Matsuzawa told them that New Zealand was a safe country where many young people went backpacking on their own. She loved New Zealand, and this trip meant a lot to her, so she promised her family that she would send them postcards to assure them of her safety once she arrived. At first, her family objected, but eventually respected Matsuzawa's wishes and agreed to let her go. After completing all her preparations and saying goodbye to her friends and family, Matsuzawa set off for her dream trip to New Zealand. Unfamiliar to her, she had already spent a year in New Zealand, during which she mostly stayed in Christchurch. With excitement in her heart, Matsuzawa embarked on her long-awaited journey to New Zealand as the plane took off. Christchurch, also known as the Garden City, is located on the east coast of the South Island and is New Zealand's third largest city, rich in art and culture. Matsuzawa experienced a vibrant, exotic atmosphere that was entirely different from Japan. She worked part-time while studying English at a local language school, where she met a woman with a similar background. They became close friends and even moved into an apartment together. They often went out together, sometimes joining social events with local young people. Matsuzawa was not good at drinking alcohol and was always careful during parties. In early September 1998, Matsuzawa planned to leave Christchurch for a one-week trip to Auckland, New Zealand's largest city, and then head north for another 5 days, eventually reaching the Bay of Islands, known for its beautiful seascapes and as the home of the indigenous Maori people. Her roommate, who wanted to travel with Matsuzawa, couldn't join her due to work commitments and tight finances. On September 11th, Matsuzawa said goodbye to her roommate and set off alone. She took flight 626 from Christchurch Airport and arrived in Auckland. Matsuzawa had pre-booked a backpackers hostel on Queen Street, where she planned to stay for 3 days. After taking the airport bus and getting off at Queen Street, around 2 in the afternoon, she headed to the hostel. The hostel was located on the second and third floors, with shops on the first floor. Matsuzawa collected her keys from the hostel front desk. Her room was number 25 on the second floor. She put her luggage in the room and took a short rest. The hostel's Queen Street location extended from the city centre to the harbour, with clothing stores, restaurants, bars and more, making it a bustling street. At 3:30 in the afternoon, Matsuzawa left the hostel, but where she went after that is unknown. Meanwhile, her mother back home in Yamagata Prefecture, Japan, was living an ordinary day. Her 2 children had grown up and left home. As she prepared lunch, her thoughts turned to her daughter Matsuzawa, who had been living in New Zealand for a full year. While she missed her daughter, she didn't worry too much because she knew her daughter was intelligent and had the ability to make friends wherever she went. Over the year, Matsuzawa often called home to reassure her family and would send postcards from various tourist spots in New Zealand, sharing anecdotes from her travels. Not long ago, Matsuzawa's mother received a postcard from her daughter, sent from Christchurch. Matsuzawa had written a few words on the postcard, expressing her birthday wishes for her mother and mentioning that she would be returning to Japan on November 4th. Her mother was deeply touched, knowing that her daughter would finally be coming home. In the days that followed, the family paid close attention to their mailbox, eagerly awaiting Matsuzawa's next postcard. Instead, they received a phone call from the New Zealand police, a call that would become a nightmare they would never forget. According to the investigation, at 3:32 p.m. that day, a surveillance camera near the hostel captured an individual. However, the details are not clear. However, it's not difficult to see that the person in the footage is petite Matsuzawa. She was wearing black pants, a black jacket, and carrying a black backpack, leaving the Queen Street Backpacker Hostel and passing by the BNC Bank headquarters. This was the last time Matsuzawa was seen, and no surveillance cameras captured her afterward. She never returned to the hostel, and her whereabouts remained unknown until 11 days later, when a firefighter, inspector, found her body in a storage room on the 2nd floor of the Central Square building, 160 meters away from the hostel. The discovery was made on September 22nd. The forensic examiner estimated that she passed away 10 days before she was found, which means she was likely killed on September 11th, the same day she left the hostel. Matsuzawa's hostel was located in the business center of Auckland, and within 100 meters of the hostel, there was a central courthouse building. Across the street from the hostel was a bank building and a shopping center. The area had several surveillance cameras, which should have captured Matsuzawa, but that was not the case, which seemed strange. The police suspected that the crime might have taken place at the hostel. With questions in mind, the investigators entered room 25 of the backpacker hostel. The room was very clean, the sheets were neatly laid, and there were no suspicious traces. The police then visited nearby shops and residential areas, but found no leads. The crime scene was located in the Central Square building, 160 meters away from the Queen Street Backpacker Hostel, in a straight line. Starting from the hostel and walking along the west side street, one can reach the Central Square building by walking south for a few minutes. The Central Square building is 7 stories tall, with its main tenants being language training institutions. The first floor is a food court, and the second floor houses an English language school for Asian students. Next to the Central Square building is the old BNP Bank headquarters, which shares a fire staircase with the lookout building. This staircase is like a maze, allowing access to each floor of the parking lot, food court, and the lookout building. The police then followed up on the clue of the cleaning staff finding the black backpack. They spent 2 weeks searching various garbage dumps in Auckland, trying to find the victim's clothes and other belongings, but they were unsuccessful. The case caught the attention of both domestic and international media in New Zealand, impacting Auckland's tourism industry to some extent. The city was once described by the media as a hellish place for female tourists. The best way to restore reputation is to find the killer as soon as possible. Auckland police used almost all of their resources to investigate the case. They also appealed to the public through the media to provide any leads. After the incident, the first person to discover the situation, Fire Inspector Dennis, became a suspect and received considerable attention. Dennis had access to any building and even knew how to forcibly enter rooms. However, entering and exiting buildings was part of his job, and his movements were monitored electronically, providing him with an alibi and ruling him out as a suspect. The police believed that the storeroom on the 2nd floor of the building was not the initial crime scene. The perpetrator committed the crime elsewhere and then moved the victim to this location. However, how the victim was transferred to the Central Square building remains a mystery. After examining the terrain, the police found a door in the parking lot on one side of the building that allowed access to the building, avoiding crowds and leading directly to the 2nd floor storeroom. There was a fire staircase entrance on this path, with a door equipped with an electronic lock. People working in the building had access cards, and every entry and exit were recorded by the electronic lock, making it possible to track people entering and leaving the building. Subsequently, the police requested the building management to provide the electronic lock records from September 11th to September 22nd. However, strangely, the data for this period was not saved. It is known that anyone with an access card can enter and exit the building freely. In addition to the door in the parking lot, there is also a door in the first floor food court that leads to the stairwell door, next to which is a security camera. Thousands of data entries are transmitted daily, from it to the building's security control panel. Some restaurants in the food court also have similar security systems outside their doors. If the perpetrator carried the body through the restaurant, there would be a record in the system, but for some unknown reason, the building management's database lacks data from September 11th to September 22nd. Additionally, there are no suspicious vehicle visit records in the parking lot downstairs. The police speculated that the perpetrator might have been aware of the risks of using a car for transportation. When entering and exiting the parking lot, people might see the body being placed in the car, and forensic evidence could be left inside the vehicle. Therefore, first, the crime scene might not be elsewhere, but somewhere within the central square building. The perpetrator might have used a suitcase or trash can to transport the body within the building. Based on these clues, the perpetrator might be someone working within the central square building. The English training institution on the second floor caught the attention of the police. The perpetrator had been studying English diligently since arriving in Australia, so they might have been there on the day of the crime. The staff of the English institution became suspects, but on the day of the crime, they were all on holiday and provided alibis. The possibility of the English institution's staff being involved in the case was ruled out. The police then investigated other employees within the building, but no one had seen the victim, nor did they find anything suspicious about them. In order to solve the case, the police offered a reward of 75,000 New Zealand dollars, hoping to obtain clues. Afterwards, the police changed their investigative approach. Starting with the victim's social relationships, the police tried to understand her comfortable home life and her openness to making new friends and interacting with strangers in Auckland. Considering this, the police hypothesized that she might have been killed by someone she had a falling out with during her stay at the hostel. After investigating the hostel's tenants, a Ukrainian tenant caught the police's attention. This Ukrainian man had bizarre behavior, a paranoid personality, and a history of mental illness. He matched the description of a witness who said they saw a disheveled older man with an Asian woman. The witness believed this Asian woman could possibly be the victim. The day she was discovered dead, this Ukrainian tenant left New Zealand for another country. As the investigation deepened, the police found out that the man was a second-hand jewelry dealer. He later went to Australia for a backpacking trip where he picked up some items, some of which resembled the jewelry worn by the victim when she was alive. By cooperating with Australian police, it was confirmed that these pieces of jewelry did not belong to the victim. New Zealand police also issued an alert to the International Criminal Police Organisation, Interpol. 2 years later, the man appeared in a French airport and was apprehended by French police before being sent back to New Zealand. The police spent 2 days investigating the man and questioning his whereabouts, after which his suspicion was ruled out. He was not the killer. In the meantime, the police also investigated other guests at the hostel, but found no suspicious individuals. Surveillance footage from the day of the murder showed only the victim leaving the hostel, so it was unlikely that anyone at the hostel knew her. 2 years later, in 2000, the New Zealand Herald reported on a potential suspect. Royal Navy Petty Officer Alan Grimson, who was facing 2 murder charges in the UK for allegedly killing 2 young men. Grimson, a British citizen, was stationed at the Auckland Naval Base as a firefighting instructor when the murder occurred. Upon returning to the UK, he was arrested for crimes committed years earlier. Grimson's first case took place in December 1997 when he met an 18-year-old sailor at a nightclub, lured him back to his home, and then sexually assaulted and killed him. A year later, Grimson repeated his crime, targeting a 20-year-old young naval officer. He was sentenced to life imprisonment for both cases, which involved young men, and he liked to pick his victims in nightclubs. However, Grimson's claim of being a firefighting instructor raised the police's suspicion. Upon investigation, it was found that the arson investigator, Dennis, knew Grimson. They had met a few times at the naval base's firefighting school, but their relationship was not close. The police believed that Dennis could easily pry open the locked storeroom, and as an instructor, Grimson could do the same, even avoiding the alarm system in the Central Plaza building. However, Grimson's victims were young men, and there was no evidence to suggest any connection between him and the killer. Therefore, after the investigation, Grimson was ruled out as a suspect. Although it took 20 years, the police extracted a man's DNA from the cracks of the Mad Bomber's bomb using DNA technology. They compared it with the DNA samples of the previous suspects, but no matches were found. The police discovered, while retrieving past data from Auckland banks, that on the day the victim's family was murdered in their home, someone had used an ATM at a glass bank next to the crime scene building. The person who inserted the bank card was indeed Songard. It was reported that the police later identified the person, but did not disclose specific information to the public. After this, there was no news of the case being solved for a long time. Perhaps the person had been ruled out as a suspect by the police. As time went on, these scattered clues still couldn't help the police solve the case. Thus, the case became a cold-blooded, unsolved crime, with all evidence related to it preserved. It is hoped that one day in the future, the suspect can be identified through DNA to provide closure for the grieving family. Many unsolved cases and countless sad stories like this one still exist in the world. Whether or not you encounter bad people, they are out there. Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates and notifications.